Chicago, 1920s. The jazz is loud, the whiskey is flowing, and the city smells of smoke, sweat, and sin. Beneath the glamorous surface of flappers, speakeasies, and neon signs, a shadow empire was rising. One built not by politicians or aristocrats, but by a man from the Brooklyn slums who dared to grab America by the throat. His name, Alphonse Gabriel Capone. Scarface, public enemy number one, the most infamous gangster in American history. This is not simply a tale of crime, it is a story of America's contradictions, the pursuit of freedom versus the hunger for order, opportunity versus corruption, dreams built on despair. Al Capone wasn't just a gangster, he was a symbol. To his followers, he was a provider. To his rivals, a bullet in the alleyway. To the police, an untouchable. To the nation, a legend wrapped in violence and style. Why should his story matter a century later? Because he shows us how crime and culture entwine, how celebrity can mask brutality, and how one man's name can haunt history like a ghost. We're about to trace his life from the streets of Brooklyn to the speakeasies of Chicago, through massacres, power, and prison, all the way to his lonely, broken end in Florida. Was Capone a cold-blooded criminal, or simply a mirror of America's hunger for power, wealth, and fame? Alphonse Capone was born January 17, 1899 in Brooklyn, New York. The son of Italian immigrants, his father was a barber, his mother a seamstress. The family was large, 9 children, and packed into crowded immigrant neighborhoods where survival meant toughness. School never fit Capone. Known for his temper, he dropped out in 6th grade, trading textbooks for street corners. Brooklyn gangs became his classroom. First the Brooklyn Rippers, later the 40 Thieves Juniors. These weren't playground cliques. They were initiation grounds into the underworld. The big turning point was meeting Johnny Torrio, an older gangster who prized brains over brute force. To Torrio, crime wasn't chaos, it was enterprise. Extortion, gambling, racketeering, these were systems that could build empires. To Capone, Torrio was the man who gave his wild instincts a blueprint. By his teens, Capone found work under Frankie Yale, a Coney Island nightclub owner. Bouncer, bartender, bruiser. Al was already feared. One drunken insult at a bar sealed his identity. After offending a woman, her brother slashed Al's face with a knife. The 3 scars across his cheek birthed his legend, Scarface. He hated the name, preferring friends to call him Snorky, slang for sharp dresser. But history prefers scars. The 5 Points Gang of Manhattan was Capone's real university. Here, he met names that would define organized crime. Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello. In 5 Points, Capone absorbed the code. Loyalty, silence, profit. The gang operated across gambling dens, rackets, and protection schemes, brutal enough to terrify but organized enough to survive. Torrio's coaching emphasized money first, violence second, unless violence was the message you needed to send. Capone learned to smile at politicians, charm women, tip the press, and then have enemies quietly vanish into alleyways. But New York was crowded with ambitious thugs, and opportunities to climb higher were scarce. Then, the great shift. Johnny Torrio was invited to Chicago to help his uncle, Big Jim Colosimo expand bootlegging. Chicago was growing, fueled by industry, politics, and corruption. And with nationwide prohibition on the horizon, Torrio called for Al to join him. Chapter 4. Rise to Power in Chicago. Chicago greeted Capone with opportunity and violence. Bootlegging became the gold rush of the 1920s. When the 18th Amendment outlawed alcohol, America didn't go dry. It went underground. Speakeasies thrived. Bootleggers ran rivers of whiskey, and gangsters grew rich. Johnny Torrio became Chicago's crime boss with Capone as his loyal lieutenant. Al managed saloons, gambling dens, and brothels. His reputation grew, charming in public, merciless in private. By his mid-20s, Capone was already a millionaire. But violence shadowed everything. Rival bootlegging gangs fought for territory. The Jennas, the O'Banion mob. Hitmen prowled the streets, assassinations punctuated the years. When North Side boss Dean O'Banion was murdered, Chicago spiraled into relentless gang wars. After Torrio himself was ambushed and nearly killed, he retired, handing the throne to Al Capone. At only 26 years old, Scarface became king of Chicago's underworld. His empire pulled in an estimated $100 million annually, a staggering sum in the 1920s. Politicians, judges, police, all were paid off or cowed. His face appeared in newspapers, half celebrity, half monster. Chicago belonged to Capone, and he ruled by fear. At the height of Capone's reign, his word could mean life or death. The bloodiest chapter came on February 14, 1929, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. 7 members of George Bugs Moran's North Side gang were lined up against a Chicago garage wall, then riddled with bullets by men dressed as police. The press exploded with disgust and fascination. No one could prove Capone's direct involvement. He was conveniently in Florida at the time, but everyone blamed him. This was more than murder. It was spectacle. America was now certain. Capone's power was absolute, and he had crossed the line from gangster businessman to public villain. Yet the people of Chicago remained divided. Thousands lined up at the soup kitchens he funded. The poor saw him as a Robin Hood of the underworld. The wealthy and the government saw a menace to civilization itself. Scarface thrived in contradictions: celebrity and outlaw, benefactor and butcher. At his height, Capone's empire was worth hundreds of millions by today's standards. He owned fleets of cars, mansions, and one of Chicago's grandest headquarters, the Lexington Hotel, his fortress of vice. His drinks flowed at thousands of speakeasies. His men controlled gambling, racketeering, and prostitution. Capone reveled in celebrity. Newspapers followed his every move. He wined and dined with entertainers, dressed in silk suits, flashed diamond rings. He was feared, but he was also envied. Americans during the Great Depression marveled at this man who seemed untouchable, even as the law stumbled against him. But power breeds paranoia. Enemies multiplied. Politicians began to align against him, and one foe, the federal government's tax investigators, would prove deadlier than any Tommy gun. In the end, it wasn't bullets that brought down Scarface. It was paperwork. Federal prosecutor Elliot Ness and the Untouchables relentlessly pursued Capone, but in the end, it was the IRS that nailed him: income tax evasion. In 1931, Capone was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. His power evaporated overnight. He was sent first to Atlanta, then to the fortress of Alcatraz. There, the once mighty king shrank, ravaged by untreated syphilis that ate away at his mind. Released in 1939, a broken man, Capone retreated to his Florida mansion. Isolated, delusional, speaking to phantoms, Scarface lived his final years a shadow of himself. On January 25, 1994, Al Capone died of a stroke, aged 48. The mighty empire of blood and whiskey had outlived its ruler. Al Capone lives on as myth. His face still haunts pop culture. In films, books, legends whispered about Chicago. But beyond the caricature lies a truth worth remembering. Capone thrived not just on violence, but on a society that enabled him. Prohibition created an empire overnight. Corruption let it grow. Public fascination gave him power. He was both a product and a creator of his times, ruthless, larger than life, a walking contradiction. And in the end, perhaps the greatest irony, the man who gunned down rivals, bribed officials, and mocked the law was undone only by a tax bill. Does Capone's story prove that power always corrupts, or that society itself creates the monsters it fears?